Good morning. It is OTB AM. It is the start of a brand new week. Dave McIntyre in the presenter's chair this morning, joined by Alan Quinlan. Good morning, sir.
Morning, Dave. How are you?
What a weekend of sport it was.
What a weekend. I'm just having a strepsil because I'm a little bit hoarse from shouting and screeching into microphones all
a
weekend.
couple of commentaries under your belt and a bit more chat elsewhere. It just had a weekend that had a little bit of everything. We'd wanted 3 or 4 hour show this morning to kind of get us through all
Loads of
the weekend. I think Storm Emma contributed an awful lot to that because we had a full suite of Alliance Hurling League fixtures, full suite of GA football or Gaelic football fixtures. We've got an awful lot sorted in terms of the Hurling League, Six Nations Championship, Manchester United, Liverpool. It's all gone off.
The Tiger's back, is he?
Well, he's certainly back. I don't know.
It's great to see, though.
It's very early. What are we? 3 minutes past 7:45 this morning. So a lot of you maybe not amongst those that stayed up last night to watch the last few holes of the Valspars Championship. I did because it's Tiger. I haven't seen an awful lot of the PJ Tour this season, but there he is. It was very Tiger-esque going back 10, 15 years. He drained an absolute bomb on 17 on the par 3 to get himself to within a shot of Paul Casey, who'd been back in the clubhouse, I think, for about 70 or 80 minutes at that stage.
We want him back, though, don't we? I think the general consensus. Look, he's maybe, I don't know how you feel about it, but
you definitely want him back.
I think for the game, it was
brilliant.
Add a bit more hype,
I wouldn't have been watching otherwise.
The excitement of it, to have him back in the mix would be great. And I like the story of the injuries and the comeback, and I love that resilience in sport.
Well, this was brilliant TV, so you have to be thankful for that. He then opted to go with an iron. I think it was a 2-iron. He went off the 18th tee, which left him way back on the 18th fairway. I think it's something like 190 yards maybe for his second shot, where most other players were going with driver and they had a very short iron in. So he left himself about 30-foot putt on the last, and he left it 2 feet short. It was so close to being spectacular. That would have forced a playoff. I'd say Paul Casey would have been in serious trouble emotionally at that stage. But it's a first PGA Tour win since 2009 for Paul Casey, so fair play to him. He's now looking forward to the Masters. But as regards Tiger, he only picked up a couple of birdies yesterday. He couldn't get anything to go for him, and he almost did it in the end.
But a bit of consistency, hopefully, will enable him to
take a massive amount from it. So that was certainly one of the big final stories of what was a massive weekend in sport.
Limerick beating Galway. Good story. Promotion.
Yeah,
in the hurling.
It's something that
they've endured a fair bit of disappointment.
His first defeat in 16 months. This is what's coming up on the show this morning. We're going to go through the back pages in a couple of moments' time. Obviously, Quinny's here to chat about the Grand Slam train, because Ireland are now in a Grand Slam week. I was doing the math this morning, just the third time in 19 years, is it? Back to 17 years, back to 2003. We've got Gary Breen will be chatting to us on football as well. Really interesting weekend in the Premier League. José masterclass. Manchester United have pretty much, 3 chances in the game, and they beat Liverpool 2-1.
José masterclass.
The Liverpool attacking machine brought to a shuddering halt at Old Trafford in the early kickoff on Saturday. Gaelic football as well. We're going to have a sift through the stories of the weekend as Dublin and Galway remain unbeaten in Division 1. Cavan unbeaten in Division 2. People know why I have a little bit of a soft spot for them. And Armagh unbeaten in Division 3, and Kerry maybe with an awful lot to think about, having left Croke Park yesterday afternoon with a 12-point defeat. And then the latest in the trial up in Belfast, the trial of Paddy Jackson, Stuart Olding, will be getting the latest in that as they get into another day in what is possibly the final week of that trial up in Belfast. We'll be speaking to our courts correspondent Frank Greaney. Look at the back pages. We're going to start with the Times Ireland. Schmidt wary of top-class England. We'll get to you just in a moment. You can see it in just a sec, but I can tell you that the Times, for those still listening to us on the audio stream, there you are. Schmidt wary of top-class England. Not top-class according to the last couple of performances.
No, and there's a little bit of criticism maybe the way Ireland play at times, and it's not always, stuff that you're jumping out of your seat, kind of standing up, clapping, and some of it's fair-ish, but some of it's unfair in my opinion. But you look at England; they've been really bland in this tournament. To be fair to Eddie Jones, since he's taken over, he's gone on this incredible run. We stopped that run last year, denying them a Grand Slam. They won the championship, but they've been really poor. And are they as good? Are they gone backwards? Did they get to a point where now they're going to reverse a little bit?
Well, I saw a quote from one English journalist saying Eddie Jones' part 2 of his development, or phase 2, is now square one. So we'll get into that a little bit later in the show as to whether or not it actually is time for England to start worrying about or starting to search for the panic button, because we're getting a little bit too close to the World Cup for comfort from their point of view. What was it, 23 wins and 24 tests?
I certainly would.
By Saturday night, it could be 3 defeats in a row.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a panic button scenario for me. I think his selections need to change a little bit.
Bit too much time
particularly around 10 and back row.
You've got the Indo.
Yeah, the Indo, this is the one that kind of jumps out for me, and when I heard this result, I didn't get to see it. Kerry left chasing shadows. Dublin walloped Kerry on Saturday in the Alliance League, Football League, and down here, Tony Ward and Rory O'Connor, the best is still to come from this Ireland team. Schmidt wary that the dangerous England can dash, slam, dream. Of course, Cheltenham lucky 15. A lot of focus on Cheltenham this week. It starts tomorrow, the big tournament.
Week of sport it is.
The examiner I have as well, the Untouchables, Six Nations title delivered. Now for the Grand Slam.
I've got the Irish Times here. Let's just get this one open for you. History and immortality beckons. It's just a massive week for Irish rugby as we go to Twickenham on the weekend. The bottom line is actually from Malachy Clerker's batch report from Croke Park. Steep learning curve for youthful Kerry as Dublin hand out a thrashing. Where are we going next? You've got the Star over there.
Make sure I have the Star, yeah. Again, some verbals here.
Yeah.
We see that in the sport. Scott Brown, you're all talking. That was Celtic beating Rangers 3-2 yesterday. Significant win for them. A little bit of some scares and some frights there. Rangers had a late chance to equalise. Dubs crushed the Kingdom up here.
Does it tell us, when you just look at Rangers-Celtic game, where that fixture has fallen to in the Irish sporting side?
But it's on the way back, I think. Yeah, well, I suppose, look, with all the sport of the weekend. It almost passes by
with all the sport of the weekend. And it's just another win for a Celtic team that are coasting to yet another championship in a league that is hugely uncompetitive.
And like Tiger Woods, like Rangers or not, if you're a Celtic fan, obviously you don't like them.
Golf needs Tiger, the Scottish Premiership.
It does, because there's too many games where it's one-sided. There's another one about Cheltenham. On the Star, Cooper hits back at O'Leary. Brian Cooper's hit out at Michael O'Leary's claims that he didn't have the hunger to succeed as Gigginstown's #1 jockey. So we've a jockey now having a go at Michael O'Leary.
Poor Michael. The back of the Racing Post. Gulf in class, that's a reference to tonight's Premier League game as Stoke hosts Manchester City, obviously so desperate for the points in their bid to try and get themselves out of the bottom three in the Premier League table, but they're fearing a little bit of a beating at the Bet365 Stadium tonight. Already a bit of pressure coming on Paul Lambert as he tries to dig them out of the hole that Mark Hughes found themselves in before he was sacked as Stoke City manager. We are going to the Mirror next, which I think is me. One more win. And that's all it will take for Ireland to seal their second Grand Slam in the last decade, and Joe Schmidt to go somewhere where he has yet to go as Irish coach. I saw one journalist this morning saying that, I think it was Eamon Sweeney in The Independent, saying that Joe Schmidt is now the greatest manager in Irish sports history, and Kerry slaughtered by the GA's beast from the east, while Limerick moved back at hurling's top table. You've already referenced that, Quinny, the fact that Limerick have beaten Galway to become the side that are going to be promoted from Division 1B. I don't think Galway will be overly upset by spending another season in Division 1B. It hasn't served them too badly over the last 2 years.
It hasn't.
They've won the league, they've won the All-Ireland and the Leinster titles, and they're going to be in a league quarter-final this time around. Yeah,
and look, I think it's... they were 8 points up at half-time, and you think normal service is taking place here, and then, in fairness to Limerick, and they've shown that throughout this league campaign, that there is a bit of a buzz there is a bit of a change.
They need Division 1A.
I went to school with John Kiley, their manager.
All right.
I'm delighted for him.
I didn't think he was that old.
Excuse me?
But I think you make a fair point in that Limerick need Division 1A more than Galway do.
They do, yeah. It's for sure. And I lived in Limerick for so long. It's my adopted county. I'm Tipperary man living next door, if you like, and there's a great rivalry between the two counties, but there's a hunger and a passion for hurling there as well. And I think it's great to see and let's hope they do well in the championship now and start, putting a bit of pressure on and bring in the performances and the consistency in the league. It's a different step up, different type of pressure, but I was delighted for him.
I think it bodes well for the Munster Hurling League, or the setup that will be the structure of the Provincial Championship Munster this time around. If you've got a strong Limerick, as we saw in 2014 when they won the Munster title, or was it 2013? Yeah, it was 2013, wasn't it? Clare beat them in the Munster semi-final. It's just, there's a different feel to the championship when Limerick are going well, because their fans need nothing really, very little encouragement to get behind them. And we'll probably see that again this year. Jim livid, and it's something we might discuss when we're chatting about yesterday's Gaelic football later, absolutely slamming the CHC's decision, I want to make sure I get that right, to uphold the red card shown to Mick Fitzsimons and the one-match suspension that he received after that late tackle on Aidan O'Shea in the win over Mayo a couple of weeks ago. He certainly didn't mince his words, accusing the GAA of attempting to sanitise the game. So when Jim speaks, most people listen. Often, a lot of it's not very interesting, but occasionally he throws a couple of bombs in there, as he did when he was speaking to the press last season after what he felt was unfair treatment for Diarmuid McConnelly. So that's something very interesting from Jim Gavin yesterday. Obviously, he'll be pretty pleased by the fact that his Dublin team have demolished Kerry, and they've made it 5 wins from 5, joining Galway at the top of the table. Light work for Dublin. Another reference to that heavy beating for Kerry. Crushed, which is one of the lines I've rather enjoyed in this morning's papers, and left them in the shade. Bruni, we did talking on the pitch. Another reference to the Old Firm Derby.
Yeah. He has the shirt off, sunglasses on.
He looks like he's on the beach in Ibiza or somewhere, doesn't he?
He loves beating Rangers, doesn't he? And you think for sports people who do a bit of chatting before and after, you've got to back it up. And he kind of shows he's not afraid to throw the verbals out there. The Rangers fans hate him.
Yeah. Because
he's always kind of jeering the crowd, running down to the end where all the Rangers fans whenever they play. But it's a bit of colour, isn't it?
It is.
A lot of colour.
I hope sometimes, particularly with the culture up there and the simmering tensions, you don't want it to boil over in some way. But at the same time, you want a little
it's
bit
humour,
of
and it wouldn't be me. And in any sport, I don't like, there's a fine line between being disrespectful to people as well. But that stuff is madness, really.
Look,
Short off, sunglasses on.
He's the Celtic captain. He's going to enjoy an old.
He gets a lot of stick, to be fair to him. He gets a lot of stick.
The odd goal and a 5-goal thriller is probably the best way to win those games. The Telegraph today, obviously, there's a lot of fallout from England's defeat to France at the weekend. So the England inquest, there's going to be an autopsy basically into how poor they were in Paris on Saturday evening. And then England fears as Kane damages ankle again. He's on crutches after injuring the joint for the third time in 18 months. If England are going to have a decent World Cup in Russia, they need Harry Kane fit and firing on all cylinders, not like he was at the Euros, where he looked absolutely jaded after a long season with Tottenham. Maybe the best thing for England is for Harry Kane to hurt his ankle now.
The best thing for Liverpool is that he has a rest for a few weeks. I don't want to see any player injured, but phenomenal. He's
but if you're Gareth Southgate,
you're worried.
A 2-month injury or a 6-week injury for Harry Kane is the best thing that could happen to you.
Yeah, he's going to be fresh and ready for Russia.
He gets an actual
Hopefully
break.
It's not an operation or anything like that.
As long as it's nothing too serious. But obviously Mauricio Pochettino needs Harry Kane to be with him and firing to help them finish in the top 3 or top 4 and maybe win an FA Cup. They haven't won a title since winning the League Cup back in 2008. And The Guardian today, another reference to Harry Kane and his injury difficulties. Kane's World Cup fear Tottenham striker sweats on scan after another ankle injury. And up, Armand's England call. Jones turns to back rower for Ireland as injuries hit slumping squad. Even if there were no injuries in the back row, you think Eddie Jones would have to make a considerable number of changes because they've been cleaned out of the breakdown for 2 games in a row. And he has said specifically after the French game, we are being left behind when it comes to the developments of the breakdown. Myself and Alan will be getting to that just in a moment, because it was a huge day for Ireland at the Aviva Stadium on Saturday, the NatWest Six Nations Championship. We'll go down to the wire from Ireland's point of view, because we are 1 win away from winning our 3rd Grand Slam, going all the way back to 1948. After the game, we heard from the head coach Joe Schmidt and the man who finished the game as captain, Johnny Sexton.
As Declan Kearney said, I was just as much as part of it as everyone else back in 2009 when I was in the Bibs. I definitely didn't feel that way, but I think I remember some of the talks that were made around those times, the O'Connells, the O'Driscolls, O'Garas, that were trying to achieve this for 10 years, and you could tell by, I suppose, their speeches and their actions through that season how much it meant to them. And they had to drag along guys like Luke Fitzgerald and Tommy, Bo, Rob Kearney, these young guys coming through, and it's very similar to that now. I think Rory is desperate for a Grand Slam because he feels that he'll be a bigger part of it now than he played back then. So for us, it's about trying to drag those young lads along. They probably think they're going to get loads of opportunities, but as I know, it doesn't work out like that. I remember playing Scotland in Croke Park for a Triple Crown and almost taking it for granted because I thought Triple Crown, I'll have plenty more opportunities with this, and I still haven't won a Triple Crown. So you got to take these opportunities with both hands when they come.
Yeah, Johnny Sexton and Joe Schmidt speaking after the game was actually well into the night because they had to wait for England's game with France and Paris to conclude before Ireland were confirmed as Six Nations champions. Joe mentioned it on TV3 yesterday in the build-up to the Wales-Italy game. It's hard to believe that Johnny Sexton hasn't even won a Triple Crown. Like, he has 2 championships but no Triple Crown. I don't know if that's a prized possession. I guess it's something you want ticked off the bucket list, just to have one in the bank. You get it all done this weekend. You have your championship, your Grand Slam, your Triple Crown all boxed off on the same day if you can get the job done at Twickenham.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Triple Crowns were probably, without being disrespectful, more prestigious, back in the day, if you like.
Or even in the beginning of Eddie O'Sullivan's reign, wasn't it? I remember 2004 Triple Crown was a huge deal because it was an Ireland team that had won nothing.
I missed that one because I got injured at the World Cup in 2003 and I was in a sling at the game thinking, geez, we haven't won one since the 80s and I'm missing this now. And it was massive for the boys at the time. And it was massive for that group and their development.
Did you get one in 06 then?
No, knee injury in 06. But to be fair, the team went on a great run under Eddie at that time from probably 03, 04 up to 2008, 9, 10. A lot of success, contesting championships every year. But it was massive at the time. I'm not dissing it in any way now. Triple Crown is vital. But there's probably more emphasis now on winning the championship, isn't there? Because of the points scenario, and that's what's changed. Back then it was, top the table and not win a Triple Crown. It was not win a Grand Slam. It was probably not as great.
Yeah.
It was nice kind of accolade, but now with all the points,
particularly for a team that hadn't won
points
anything.
difference and the trophy for winning the tournament. It's massive, so it'll be huge. There's no doubt about it. It'll be huge, and
of course, if they win the
England
Triple
will
Crown, they've won the Grand
rubbing
Slam.
their hands like.
Yeah, well, they will. We'll talk England maybe in a bit of detail in a moment. But you were around the squad in 2009. I know you didn't play in that game in Cardiff, but you were there. You were part of the preparations.
Like Johnny says, I was very much a part of it. I was in the bibs for 6 weeks, holding tackling pads, and praying and hoping that
somebody went down.
Well, you kind of
like
you never
David
want
Wallace
anyone injured, but I think a little calf strain or something like that. But there was a serious back row.
Yeah.
It was Heaslip, Wallace, Leamy. They were phenomenal. Ferris was in the mixes. Ferris was there as well. So it was unbelievable players.
What was the week like? Can you remember when you come back? And again, it was a win over Scotland that set up the Grand Slam decider.
Yeah,
and it was one that was hard fought
after the win in round 3 against England, which was only a 1-point win in Dublin here. And you probably think at the start of every tournament, and my history being involved in Six Nations campaigns, is you look at the fixtures, you know yourself as a player. When England and France are coming to Dublin, you think, this is a chance to beat the big two. Are we capable of going to Cardiff and Murrayfield and getting results? Of course we are. So there's a little bit more anticipation that this is your year, this is the opportunity. And this year we've done it the hard way. When you think, because France and England came to Dublin in 2009, but this time we've gone to Paris and we've got to go to Twickenham to win the Grand Slam. So in some ways it'll be more of an achievement, I think, to get those 2 big away
Sexton
wins.
said as much. He said to win a slam in an odd year would be, or an even year rather, would be a spectacular achievement. Tell me, so what is it going to be like? Yesterday was a day off. Obviously the players needed a little bit of time to recover. Is it just another game? Or is there just a slightly different feel to the place in Carton House today as they begin what is a potential historic week?
People on the outside and people who haven't experienced it are thinking, will it be in the back of the minds? What's the mindset like? Do you know what Scotland was like last week? A semi-final of a cup. Yeah. You're now in the final. So what do these players do when they're playing Heineken Cup finals? And a lot of them have done that, or Champions Cup finals, or big games in finals, and a lot of them have experienced that. Of course, there's extra pressure and there's extra nerves, but experience has helped you deal with that. There's a nervous anticipation. So Friday night, there'll be unbelievable buzz. You're in London, it's Paddy's weekend, loads of Irish there, you're going into a big cauldron, and there'll be that nervous excitement and anticipation. Would we have preferred as Irish people that England won? Probably, because now you're kind of the wounded animal, if you like, scenario, the backlash, the pressure on them. Eddie Jones will probably make some changes. So they'll be very aware of the threat. Going to Twickenham at any stage, even this little mini crisis that England are having, it's going to be incredibly difficult. And I said this day before the start of the tournament, I thought we'd get, and I was confident we'd get to this stage where we'd win against France, win our home games and go there. My concern was, and I'll be open and honest about it, was that it's going to be very difficult to win there. That's changed slightly. It's going to be difficult to win there. Not very, very, very
confident.
difficult.
We go as favourites.
Yeah, well, you see,
we go as champions.
And this is the thing, and you think, what's the mindset of the players Saturday night? Do they go out and have a few drinks? Recovery is the most important thing after a game like that. How are we going to be as fresh and peaked and ready to rock and roll next Saturday? And that's the important thing. And then, then they've got to get the training right this week, get the balance right between intensity and, getting the work done, if you like, and not overtraining. But they've got to explode out of the blocks next Saturday because England will physically try and beat them up. And that's what happens when you play teams. In rugby anyway, in my experience, when you play someone who's lost the week before, you're going to get an anger, pressure, a real kind of a grueling intensity from them.
Especially with them at home.
Yeah, but I think in some ways, and part of me thinks this, that maybe because we haven't got that fourth or fifth gear scenario throughout this tournament, we've tipped into fourth a couple of times. The players acknowledge that. Joe Schmidt acknowledges that. Will we get up into that fifth gear? Is there a bit of pressure off now? Is this let's go, have a right crack at this? There's no point in losing next Saturday, being kind of conservative and playing within themselves and waiting for England to make mistakes. They've got to go and play, I think, next Saturday to get a result. Because England will throw caution to the wind, they'll be dangerous at that stage. Now, we got to be robust and organised and maybe frustrate England into making mistakes because confidence will be a bit low in the English. And, will they force a couple of errors? Will they try things that maybe may come against them? So we've got to be in that mindset where we put relentless pressure on them. But I think in some ways there's a confidence within this group and there's a lot of characters that if they execute a little bit better, take the lead, even if it's only 3, 6, 9 points. If they get a couple of penalties, if they're, going at half time ahead, the pressure is all on England here, even though that sounds crazy because we're the ones trying to win a Grand Slam. There's definitely more pressure in England to get a result.
Okay. Would this sum up the game on Saturday? Clinical Ireland beat wasteful Scotland? Because it didn't really appear to be a 20-point game, did it?
No, it didn't. And Scotland...
They've gifted us 7.
They definitely blew
and they've coughed
a
up
really clear-cut chance with the Hugh Jones pass in the first half. He does a lovely little dink kick, gets clean through, give the pass to Stuart Hogg and he's under the post. It just didn't feel, we ended up being 7-3 up after 20 minutes and it just didn't feel like we deserved that. It was against the run of play a little bit. Scotland were really good and I think, chatting to some of the Scots afterwards, they were actually disappointed, of course, but pleased with their application, their effort, not their application, their effort, and they realised that, look, just a couple of things went against them and they could have been a lot closer. But any critics of the Irish team have got to realise that it's a 20-point win. We've 17 tries scored in 3 games. We didn't score any against France. That's a serious return in scoring. Okay, 8 of them were against Italy, but we've 2 bonus point wins. And if that was in Champions Cup, you'd be absolutely delighted to have bonus point wins at home. They're hard to come by, so...
I guess when we look back at this in 10 years' time, on this championship, particularly if we've won a Grand Slam, the numbers on the page won't reflect the way the games went.
Yeah,
obviously.
we're not jumping out of the seats, are we?
Yeah, it took the 84th minute or the early 3rd minute to beat the French. It took the last score of the game.
Are we being too greedy? I've thought about this over the weekend.
I don't know if we're being too greedy. I think it's just a realisation of how different things could have been and how fine the margins are. But that's elite top-level sport.
Yeah, it is, and there's probably mitigating factors maybe to the flow of the type of some of the game and the way things are breaking down a little bit because they are trying to move the ball a fair bit.
Well, let's look at
the centre partnerships have changed the whole way through the tournament, which has a massive effect, because that kind of midfield scenario is really vital to your attack.
They created chances and took them, which is how John Barclay, the Scottish captain, described it. What is it about this Ireland team that makes them so efficient when it comes to scoring tries? Because we do make the most of the chances that come our way.
They don't panic. I think they could score more if they're a little bit more clinical. and take their opportunities and cut out the errors. We spoke about it after the game on Saturday, yourself and myself. They had 7 handling errors in the first half and none in the second half. So that's real efficiency, where you don't have that. You're not knocking the ball on, you're not losing it in contact, you're not getting it turned over. We lost a couple of lineouts in the first half, a couple of drop balls, turned the ball over. You want to keep those turnovers to a minimum, because it takes away what you're trying to do. So I thought they were, it was a really, really resilient, determined performance, and with a lot of pressure as well and expectation to get a result. So, I probably personally am guilty for expecting too much and expecting this brilliant performance. But it was a brilliant performance. We won by 20 points.
But you have to look at the areas for improvement, don't you? If you're going to be really critical of a team like Joe Schmidt will be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And defensively, while we have scored 17 tries, we have also conceded 3 against the Welsh, 3 against the Italians, 1 against France. Somehow we only got away with conceding 1 at the weekend. And while executing the skills under pressure and attack is what it has put Ireland in the position that they're in, we were again cut open multiple times, and it's becoming a regular theme now, isn't it? That it hasn't been enough to derail Ireland in this championship, but everything now is being watched through the prism of the World Cup, which is coming hurtling down the tracks now. We have to play this Scottish team twice next year. And at what stage do we really begin to worry about our vulnerabilities defensively?
I think if you take if you look at the line breaks and the couple of opportunities Scotland had, there's a piece of individual brilliance from Hugh Jones with that ding kick. You got to applaud that. I said that a couple of weeks ago. You applaud that kind of stuff. Hogg was in midfield. If that's a try, you stand up and say, brilliant piece of individual work. Once or twice, we just got a tiny little bit caught in one-on-one situations where we plant our feet and we make poor decisions. So, to be honest, the defence was a lot better on Saturday. In the wider channels, we didn't come as hard. We drifted as a group. And we gave up a few yards, and that can happen in the wider areas. We made our tackles and then contested a breakdown. And you get an opposition team in the touchline. That's where you want to get them slow down a little bit and then get off the line and win those collisions in midfield and put them behind the gain line. So I thought we did that really well. So for me, the defence was better. It was a lot better. It was a short period of time to improve that. So I think it was a lot better. Can it be better again? Of course, it can be more dominant and it can be more connected. I think the try Scotland scored, I think Jacob Stockdale sat down a little bit and planted his feet, and he has a tendency to do that. There was a little short runner, he kind of just stopped for him. Rob Kearney then has to come in, and it's just a simple little pass in the corner. So people are saying that, maybe it was Kearney's fault, but I think Stockdale needs to push him out and really let him know that he hasn't kind of bought that dummy runner on the short line.
It did seem to be numbered up as the attack unfolded.
Yeah. But you're talking about going soft in the wider channels. When you're that close to your line, that's when you probably need to get off the line a bit more aggressively, and we were a little bit passive getting off the line there. And it was a solid scrum, good attack from Scotland, but probably shouldn't have conceded that. And it would have been a massive boost from if they didn't. But realistic on the balance of play, Scotland probably should have had 2 tries on the board. We would have been 15 point winners maybe then at that stage. So 20 points was a lot, and it flattered us a little bit. But you 4 wins, and that's the important thing. But I think there is no doubt about it, we'll be sitting here next Monday morning and we'll be saying we either changed those gears and went from 3rd stroke 4th up into 5th for a few occasions, and we'll be here as winners and Grand Slam winners, because if we don't improve, if we don't actually go out and improve the performance to take it up another level, you're not going to beat England, because we can't get lulled into this scenario. England are not as good as maybe they were, but they're capable. If Eddie Jones makes some changes, he puts Owen Farrell into 10, puts Theo and Joseph in the centre, that's a serious midfield. If he picks some back row players, will he bring Simmons into the back row? Don Armand, the Exeter player, who's very underrated and unheralded, if you like. He's been fantastic for Exeter. He could start. I just think that balance of Courtney Laws, Rob Shaw and Hughes, they're all big, strong men, and the game has changed so much now with the back row. We've seen it throughout this tournament. There's a contest at every breakdown.
And not a 7 in sight, really, amongst those three.
None, they're not. And when you look at our back row, we have Levy winning turnovers on Saturday. It was fantastic. Peter O'Mahony. And sometimes it's not about winning back row, the ball and getting those turnovers. It's slowing the ball down. That 2 seconds or second and a half or whatever it is, it gets your defence set. It's massive.
And as Eddie Jones has said, they are being left behind in the break-in 16 pounds.
But he's so bullish, he might go and say to him, well, I'll back you now to respond.
Well, he backed them
because to be fair,
after the Scotland game, didn't he?
And the guys who've lost these 2 games, they've won a huge amount. We're talking about that run at the start. But I think a more dangerous England will involve changes, and that'll be Farrell at 10.
16 penalties against the French. Ireland are averaging 5 per game. If you're going to concede close to 20 penalties in a game, you've absolutely no chance of winning it. And yet they were in injury time at the end of the game in Paris. For some reason, Lionel Boxey's opting to try and kick for touch around halfway instead of just dropping the ball. There's an awful lot to look forward to this week, Alan. You'll be a huge part of it. Here, we'll talk to you Thursday.
Thanks Dave. Pleasure.
Final word on the game at the weekend. Ireland beating Scotland to set up this Grand Slam tilt at England at Twickenham. Here was Hugo McNeill on Gary Ringrose's performance.
Gary Ringrose is a natural centre. He's played all his life at that. I think it's the most difficult position on the field to play because you've so little space, you're so constricted. Gordon Darcy, much more recent and much more better player than I ever was said it took him 4 years to switch from the wing or full back to centre. And Gordon Darcy was a child prodigy when he sort of came out. So I think that's, it goes back to the point that we were sort of making at the start, that Gary Ringrose, he's always lived in this area where you have very little space, where you need to react quickly, where you need to sort of be able to click with the guys beside you. And I think what's going to be really exciting, if Gary Ringrose gets a run, in the team, that you have somebody who's just a natural player. And I
think it's really interesting, Hugo, whether really good 13s have naturally that brilliant spatial awareness, or whether they develop it by living in that tiny space that you're talking about. I think it's a really interesting point. Yeah. He looks to me like a guy who actually has that peripheral natural awareness.
We've talked about it before in here, is that the most important person, and we talked about New Zealand having a constant midfield when they won the World Cup with Dan Carter, with Man, but Conrad Smith Smith was the most influential player. He was the guy who, with everything he did, made sense. It always just smoothed the back line. In the first try that New Zealand scored in the last World Cup at Twickenham, the final, Conrad Smith was involved in 3 times, and none of them were flashy moves, none of them were breaks. They were link passes, they were creation of space.
Yeah, well, Gary Ringrose was limping very heavily towards the end of the game on Saturday, so fingers crossed he comes through training this week unscathed. Ireland can ill afford another change to midfield, given that there's no sign of Chris Farrell and Robbie Henshaw coming back anytime soon. Bundyaki could do with a little bit of consistency alongside him in midfield as Ireland go to look and win at Twickenham to win the Grand Slam. Okay, we're going to switch the focus to Gaelic games now, because Dublin and Galway look set to meet in the Division 1 final of the Alliance Football League, and both winning at the weekend to make it 5 wins from 5. Oisin Langan was at Croke Park for Off the Ball yesterday, watching Dublin dismantle Kerry, beating them by 12 points. We're going to chat to Oisin about what we saw yesterday in a moment, but first let's get his thoughts, speaking to Longford and Kilmacud Crokes footballer Brian Kavanagh after the game at Croke Park.
They just stepped it up another level. Their support runners were coming out from everywhere, and it was emphasised then when Kieran Kilkenny scored his goal in the 42nd minute with the overlaps that created the goal chance. So they just took it up a level or two that Kerry weren't able to live with their fitness wise. They seemed to be blowing a small bit in the second half. Maybe their running game mightn't suit their players as much as a kicking game would.
They were blowing hard. They were bullied by Dublin, maybe even. Is that a worry, even though they're quite young?
Yes, they never turned up in the second half, and they probably need a few of the older guys to come back in and steady ship, especially in Barry John Keane came on in the second half, and he didn't get a sniff of the ball at all, and they were just totally dominated in all aspects. In the first half they were in trouble with their kick out, but they were coping admirably well in all other areas of the game, but in the second half they were just outclassed in all facets.
Can they take any positives maybe from the display of David Clifford? Is that a positive that they can take?
David Clifford is a positive. Their first 25 minutes when they were going toe-to-toe with Dublin, that's a positive as well, but after that it was when Dublin took control that they'd have to look at.
So that was Oisin chatting to Brian Kavanagh at Croke Park yesterday afternoon. Oisin joins us this morning. Thanks a million for getting up early and having a chat with us, Oisin. How are you?
I'm very good, Dave. How are you?
Good. You were there yesterday. In the Irish Independent today, Colm Keys has said if Dublin are doing this to Kerry, where does it leave the rest of the country? And it does look ominous, doesn't it? A 12-point win. Just to go through the guys that Dublin didn't have yesterday. Mick Fitzsimons suspended, Conor Callaghan club commitments, James McCarthy rested, Diarmuid Connolly rested, but we'll get to that in a moment. That's an odd one. Kevin McManaman, Paul Flynn, Owen O'Gara, Paul Mannion, McCaffrey and Brogan are a little more long-term in terms of their injury profile, but there are 5 current All-Stars in that list, and still Dublin are winning by double digits against supposedly one of their real challengers, potentially for an All-Ireland later in the year.
One of their real challengers, Dave, but not the way they were set up yesterday, or not, should I say, the way that they were staffed yesterday, missing an awful lot of players. Kerry, yes, they want to give the young guys a chance. Yes, they'll probably rely on these young guys come championship, but certainly that wasn't the Kerry team that will start in the championship. Now, I did see it pointed out that maybe numbers 1 to 8 wasn't far off Kerry in the championship, but up front, especially in the second half, especially in the first 20 minutes of the second half, they had absolutely no impact. I remember before when Kilkenny were at their pomp during the kind of 4-in-a-row era, someone saying it's always that first 20 minutes of the second half that a team like Kilkenny gets you. And it's the same with Dublin. They have kind of a similar level of dominance as that Kilkenny team. Their strength, their physicality, their ability to run out of defence and create overlaps. That was the real difference, especially in that second half. Now, Kerry were unfortunate in the fact that Paul Greaney had to go off and Sean O'Shea, who was actually playing quite well, had to go off as well. And the two of those had goal chances in the first half. And they will be kicking themselves for missing them, and rightfully so. Paul Greaney hit the butt of the post. Sean O'Shea flashed wide when he'd actually got around Cluxton. Johnny Cooper dropped back onto the line, but he just couldn't find the target. Stephen Cluxton was also forced to make a good save, I think, from Kevin McCarthy. So those were 3 chances in the first half that Kerry had. Had they got maybe 2 of those goals, who knows what way the game would have went. But Dublin were very impressive, and it's scary the talent they have and the reserve of talent that they have. But it's kind of odd, no matter who plays for them. They're not kind of personnel dependent. They play the same way regardless who's out there.
Yeah, you mentioned the goal chances that Kerry created, and look, we know that if you're going to beat Dublin, you do need to score goals. And the injuries as well, half-time losing Greaney is big, although he's not actually in the best form at the moment. But that kind of thing is going to happen over the course of a championship, isn't it? And Kerry just didn't seem to be able to react to the loss of a couple of those key guys. And I would just wonder, if you get into the meat and drink of the championship, a side that completely loses their shape, doesn't score more than 3 points in the last 45 minutes of a game. It's only the league, which is what a lot of Kerry fans might say. This time last year they were bigging up the league because they'd managed to beat Dublin.
They were, and it's somewhere in between, I think. Now, you have to keep in mind with Kerry, they'll obviously have a relatively easy run to the Munster final, with the greatest respect to the other teams in Munster, and then they'll get into the Super 8. So they have time to build up, and because they have that kind of innate ability and they have that innate belief, which is even as important, I don't think they'll be too concerned about the trimming that they took yesterday. They will take the positives. Do they want to be hammered by Dublin and Croke Park? No. Do they want their guys to step up and show maybe that they can do something in headquarters against Dublin, regardless of circumstance or time of year? Of course they did, but they did get a bit of something out of yesterday. David Clifford looked to the manner born. I mean, he kicked 2 absolutely sweet points in the first half, had a few chances, kicked a few frees. There was one free which he moodily, or I should say oddly, kicked short. They tried to create a goal chance and it just didn't work out, so maybe that's a lesson learned for him. But Fitzmaurice quite clearly said to these lads, go man on man and have a go, and they would have picked up stuff from that. And Kerry have taken trimmings in the league from Dublin before, and they've bounced back and they've been competitive. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I'd apply this to Mayo as well. I never worry about Kerry and what they do in the league. I kind of look more at their individuals and things they're taking rather than their results. And I think Eamon Fitzmaurice, without thinking for him or speaking for him, might say the same. Now, he wouldn't have wanted that second half display, that's obvious, but I don't think it's as bad maybe as people think.
Okay, just before we leave Dublin, Diarmuid Connolly was asked, Jim Gavin was asked about him after the game, and he said he's being rested. This is a guy who's played 26 minutes of football for Dublin this year, has had no club commitments to speak of in comparison to previous seasons. What's going on here?
I'm not quite sure. It could be just a case that, if he's been training incredibly hard, then maybe he does need a rest.
I'm sure he's training as hard as the rest of the players who are playing every game.
He is, Jay, but Jim Gavin is a very smart manager, and he's not one of these guys who just trains the bejesus out of everyone. I think he looks at everyone as an individual and knows what they need, and that's the important thing about Jim Gavin. And yes, he has the comfort to do that because he's got so many options. Other managers just don't have those options, but Jim Gavin does. And I think if he's resting Diarmuid Connolly, he's doing it for a reason. It's a reason we may not find out until Connolly releases a book, and I really hope he does in the coming years. But I at the moment, I wouldn't be too suspect of it. I'm hoping maybe Connolly's trying to exit to the hurling panel, because I've always wanted to see Connolly play hurling for Dublin or at inter-county level.
And of course Dublin booked their place in the hurling quarter-finals yesterday. Quick word on Galway, Oisín. They're 5 from 5 as well. I'm not sure we'll take an awful lot of learnings from the game in Salthill, but it's certainly going to be interesting to watch Galway with this blueprint that they've taken into the first few rounds of the league, take on the All-Ireland champions, and there'll be a massive crowd at that game. It's going to be a real occasion in comparison to other months of the year. So as regards March of this season, it's actually going to be something to look forward to.
Yeah, and it's a reward for the Galway fans who've had a tough couple of years, even though they've won a kind of title and they've got to the quarterfinals. But they're not where they want to be. They're Galway. They should be at the very least in the semi-finals each year. They certainly have the talent to do that. I've been lucky enough to see them in the flesh a couple of times this year. I saw their under-21s last year, and they've just got a nice little blend of youth and experience. Now, I do think they're going to have to evolve their game, Dave, if they're to have a chance of winning big games in the championship. I think it's just a bit too simplistic at the moment to just sit deep and break. They have an awful lot of talent. Granted, they're doing it with better players than maybe other teams try to do it. We'll say weaker teams when they come up against stronger teams, so it does give them a chance. But it'll be a good test of where Galway are at, I think. And it's a weird one as well, because they could well end up meeting Dublin in the league final in Croke Park, and that would be a big occasion as well. But I'm excited about Galway. They beat Monaghan yesterday. Monaghan lost a man early enough. It was a silly foul. They actually probably should have given away a couple of penalties. I think David Goff maybe let them off in the end. But certainly with Eamon Brannigan, Peter Cook, Shane Walsh, guys like that, I'm really excited by Galway. And they've got a few young lads as well who are incredibly decent, including Sean Andy O'Kella, who could be the answer to the fullback question. He just looks like a class player in that position, and it's a position that they've needed to solidify in the last couple of years, and they look like they're doing it.
Oisín, you're a gent. Thanks a million.
My pleasure.
And thanks to Oisín, who took the call from us a little bit at short notice this morning. Sam Gleeson's been in touch wondering where the hell is Oisín, because the quality of that line was incredibly good for a man who was broadcasting from underneath the bridge somewhere. I don't know if he's in Dublin or whether he's elsewhere in the country, but thanks to Oisín Lagan, who was watching Dublin dismantle Kerry yesterday. He mentioned Galway 5 from 5. And barring a cataclysmic set of results, Galway and Dublin will meet twice in the space of 3 weeks, because they will be contesting the Division 1 League final at Croke Park. Dublin essentially have to lose to Galway and Monaghan at Croke Park in their final game. So almost certain that Dublin will be contesting what I think is the 6th league final in a row, and a chance to win a first national title since 2001 from Galway's point of view. So an awful lot of interesting developments still to come. Strong words from Jim Gavin as well after the game. He slammed the GAA, or specifically the Central Hearings Committee, after they had taken the decision last week to uphold the red card shown to Mick Fitzsimons for a late challenge in the game against Mayo, late challenge on Aidan O'Shea. He says maybe there's an objective to sanitise the game of Gaelic football. I look at the hurling fraternity and they've kept the physicality in their game, so we just need to be mindful of that. So when Jim Gavin speaks, most people listen, and he certainly had strong words for the CHC, and still talk that they're actually going to continue their quest to clear Fitzsimon's name for that incident, if that's the right terminology to use, because there's some talk that they will take it on to the CAC, despite the fact that he's already served his one-match suspension. Okay, the big story of the weekend was Limerick winning the hurling and Dublin beating Kerry, but there's another story developing this morning. We're going to talk a bit more football with Andy Mitten on Manchester United Liverpool in a moment, but Sky Sports pundit, former Liverpool and England defender Jamie Carragher is in a little bit of bother this morning, and this is why.
Jamie Carragher there, look. Stop it. Jamie. 2-1. 2-1. 2-1, mate. Yeah. Unlucky Jamie, lad. 2-1, lad.
So, that piece of film courtesy of the Daily Mirror over in the UK. Jamie Carragher spits at football fan and his daughter in shocking video, and a reaction on Twitter came from one particular man, Richard Keys. Well, this will be interesting. You wonder where Richard Keys is mentally at the moment, that he's still bitter about his manner with his exit at Sky Sports, and that he's getting involved in stuff like this, because he clearly believes that Jamie Carragher should be sacked from his role at Sky Sports. He's comparing, I guess, his behaviour with the behaviour of himself and Andy Gray that led to their demise at Sky Sports. I'd be very interested in you getting in touch with us on Off the Ball this morning on OTBAM as to whether or not you think Jamie Carragher should lose his job for that. He has since apologised. He has spoken by telephone to the man in question and his daughter, who was in the car with with him. Clearly Jamie Carragher has lost his cool, and it's a bit of a dissension of the red mist. It's something he should not have got involved in, and it's kind of disgusting behaviour to be spitting at a motorist who's passing you by. But who knows how long the abuse went on for. But it's certainly an interesting development this morning, and Sky Sports have told the public that they have reminded Jamie Carragher of his responsibilities and the way he should be behaving. Okay, let's get on to matters that actually took place on the field of play at the weekend. Here was Gary Breen, who was alongside Nathan for Arsenal's win at the weekend. A pretty comfortable victory over Bournemouth.
Yeah, I don't think they have a voice now. I think that's probably the only way they can do it, show their displeasure, is literally by not coming. We've had it so often now that they've made it known to the hierarchy, but they've just been ignored. And people talk about respect, that Arsene Wenger should be shown it. I think the Arsenal fans should be as well. This is the most expensive ticket in European football in terms of season ticket for Arsenal, and they've not been getting what they've been used to in terms of that first decade with Arsene Wenger. But certainly an empty stadium like that, I think the message was got across today.
You were at Old Trafford yesterday for the big game of the weekend. Manchester United, a 2-1 win against Liverpool. It was intense. What did you take from it?
It was fantastic. It was everything you hoped it would be in terms of the build up to it, the biggest game in English football, and it proved that way. Tactically, it was fascinating to watch. It's no surprise that José Mourinho put on a masterclass again, snuffed out Liverpool's offensive threat, and he did it with a 4-4-2, as basic as that. McTominay is a young central midfielder. Lots been made about Paul Pogba, but you can probably see why McTominay gets in the team. He's efficient, he's effective, and alongside Matic, they were brilliant, denying any balls getting into Firmino, who's been in brilliant form. And although it went to 2-1 and Bailly made that mistake, I didn't ever feel that like Liverpool were going to get back into that game.
How did they keep Salah quiet?
Well, Ashley Young was fantastic. He's a left back, well, he's a left winger by trade, but he's a left back, right footed player. So anytime Salah looked to come inside, he was coming into Ashley Young's strong right foot. Also, what they did so well is the midfielders were there to collect him. The centre halves were narrow, and there was just no space. There was certainly no space in behind. Manchester United defended literally on the 18-yard box. And at the beginning of the game, it looked like Manchester United were the away team. And that's not the norm. That's not normally what you associate with United, and it's certainly not what their fans expect. But I think they would be delighted with their team's performance.
So it was Gary Breen who was on co-commentary duty alongside Nathan for Off the Ball at the Emirates Stadium yesterday. Initially talking to Nathan about the number of empty seats at the Emirates Stadium yesterday, albeit it has been a good week for them in comparison to the horror show of the previous 7 days, having won at the San Siro on Thursday evening and followed up with a Premier League win yesterday. And they finished it by discussing Manchester United's win over Liverpool 2-1 at Old Trafford in the early kick-off in the Premier League on Saturday afternoon. To discuss that, we are being joined by Andy Mitten. Andy, I guess there was a lot of negativity in the air after those defeats to Tottenham and to Newcastle, and the rather insipid way in which they approached the first leg of the Champions League last 16 knockout tie against Sevilla in Seville. But that's now 3 Premier League wins in a row. Chelsea and Liverpool beaten. A top 4 place looking almost secure. They're 9 points clear of Chelsea now with 9 games to go. So José turning the tide a bit again.
Yeah, it's been a very good couple of weeks for Manchester United. Had you asked me about the mood at half-time at Selhurst Park, I would have said it was terrible. United were absolutely dreadful last Monday night, but the second half was fantastic, scored 3 goals. People have been saying there hasn't been enough great Manchester United moments. Well, there was at Selhurst Park last week, a last-minute winner, the players running into the fans, a great goal. And that spirit, I think, carried forward onto Saturday. And it's been a season of sort of mood swings among Manchester United. You have 2 or 3 really good weeks, and then you have a bad week, and people, they start to question the players, they start to question the manager. But there's a real high around at the moment. And as you said, the league position looks very strong, so strong that United can focus on the cups, which they need to do this week, with Tuesday's game against Sevilla, and then the FA Cup game at home against Brighton on Saturday. I mean, that's a very favourable draw. Sevilla are a very good team, but Manchester United could have been drawn with Real Madrid, with Paris Saint-Germain. It could have been much, much worse. And the 0-0 draw in Seville, I would say, was not a good Manchester United performance, but it was a good result. And I'm confident with United's home form because the team has not lost at home. Lost once at home in the last year, and that was against Manchester City. The previous home defeat was also against Manchester City. Sevilla are not Manchester City, so I'm pretty confident going into the game tomorrow night and also the Brighton game on Saturday.
The win of the weekend was obviously built on a first half performance where they took their chances, and both goals were derived from fairly agricultural means. Route one ball, one off a flick on, and another with a little bit of fortune off a deflection that led to Marcus Rashford's second strike. But it just seemed to me watching it that it was built on winning the second balls in that first half. That certainly for the first half an hour, any second ball that needed to be won, it was a Manchester United player that got to it, whether on the ground or in the air. And it just, to me, it said an awful lot about the way they were playing for their manager and the way they were playing for each other.
Yeah, I think it was a deliberate tactic of José Mourinho. I think he started with a 4-2-3-1, but it actually looked like a 4-4-2, especially when Liverpool had possession. And they had a lot of possession right at the start of the game. I think Romelu Lukaku, he's known as a goal scorer, but he's much more than that. And he's winning balls. He won a lot of balls in Sevilla, when often he was the only man played up front. And he had nobody around him, and that was a struggle. At Old Trafford, it was slightly different. He won the ball, which set up Marcus Rashford. Rashford has been profligate sometimes with his finishing, but on Saturday you could see his confidence was up. He stepped past Trent Alexander, who was criticised, and he finished fantastically, not just once but twice. 2 goals in 10 minutes against Liverpool at Old Trafford. When you're a Manchester lad, when you're a United fan, when you're 20 years old, that's the stuff that dreams are made of. And Rashford has had times this season where he struggled. No one's really complaining when he was dropped for the start of 2018. He'd scored 1 goal in his previous 8 league starts, and he hadn't scored when he'd come on as a substitute either. I don't think Alexis Sanchez's arrival helped him get more minutes, but he came on Saturday because he had to, because Anthony Martial wasn't available, and he was superb. And Rashford is not Manchester United's biggest name player, but already in his short career, he scored the winner at Manchester City away. He scored 2 against Arsenal, 2 on his debut in a key European game. He scored at West Ham, brilliant goal in a huge FA Cup match. So he's doing well in the big matches. But young players just needs to find more consistency, and that's a conundrum which José Mourinho has. He has it with Anthony Martial as well, and he has it with Jesse Lingard, and that's probably the difference between Manchester United and Manchester City. He just needs more consistency from more of his players. But on Saturday there were no complaints about a lot of the performances from the majority of players. Ashley Young playing at left back. You mentioned that Liverpool were not able to get the ball to Firmino. Well, Mohamed Salah struggled as well against Young. I think he read him quite well. He knew what he did. He knew that he tends to step in from the left. And so Young was one of many excellent Manchester United players. Eric Bailly was back. He was excellent. He even scored. A man who managed to beat David De Gea. And Lukaku, Rashford and McTominay. He's played 19 games for Manchester United. He looked like he played 190 games. I had my doubts when McTominay started. I'm still not completely sold on him, but I can see that the manager puts a huge amount of trust in him. He rarely loses the ball. He looks composed. He's efficient. He does exactly what his boss asks of him. So you can see why he's getting picked.
Yeah, there was a bit of talk after the game about McTominay. José Mourinho almost issuing a smackdown to some supporters that had criticised McTominay early in the game after he opted to pass the ball backwards instead of trying to get the team going forward. And I thought, Andy, and maybe give us your thoughts on this, that the comments of Nemanja Matic after the game on McTominay were notable. He said that he's a joy to play with, fights for the team, and in reference to what you've just said, he plays like a guy who's spent 5 or 6 years in the Premier League. And it's far easier for Nemanja Matic, I would have thought, to play with Scott McTominay than it is Paul Pogba.
Yeah, he does exactly what his manager asks of him. And I saw what Mourinho said about the reaction from supporters. And I actually asked Mourinho after he'd said that about the atmosphere, because he's been critical of it. But it was the best it's been at Old Trafford on Saturday for years. It was fantastic. And the Liverpool fans were decent as well, I have to say that. I posted some footage of him singing that Allay, Allay, Allay song after the game. It drove me mad that I couldn't get it out of my head. Even though Manchester United had beaten Liverpool, I've got this song bouncing around my head because I stayed after the game and Liverpool fans just kept singing that song over and over again. But McTominay is more predictable than Paul Pogba. That is a negative and a positive. And in Mourinho's eyes, it's a positive. So Pogba is a player who dares, who takes chances, who takes risks, who tries to beat a man. You're not really going to see that from McTominay, but you can see why that José Mourinho likes a player like that. Pogba's had illness. He's having his most difficult time since he joined Manchester United. There's not an issue between him and the manager. I know that for certain. But he needs to get his form back. He needs to be playing, and he needs to be standing out in games like Liverpool at Old Trafford. And he hasn't really had he hasn't really done that since joining Manchester United. He's been brought to to change those big matches, and he had a terrible game against Liverpool last year. But then games between United and Liverpool have been really poor, pretty consistently. So I found it quite refreshing. I know I might see it through the red-tinted spectacles of a Manchester United supporter, but I thought it was a really, really good game. United were excellent in the first half, and I thought Liverpool played really well in the second half. And it had a level of entertainment which has been lacking between games featuring England's two biggest and most successful teams.
What were your thoughts on the performance of Alexis Sanchez, Andy? Because on Monday against Crystal Palace, again, you can't really fault his effort and his application, but nothing happened for him. And with the ball, it was an appalling display, really. Even the simplest of passes didn't quite come off for him, although he did have a hand in the goal when it came to winning the game at the very end. But again, on Saturday afternoon, again, full of effort, full of running, but not an awful lot of inspiration. Why is he struggling?
I think he's at a new club and he's trying to fit in with a new system. He probably did the best thing I saw on the pitch on Saturday, aside from the goals, where he just managed to beat a few players with his tricks and heels and win the ball at a pretty important time in the game when Liverpool were pushing for a late equaliser, and Manchester United fans, including myself, were watching the game through the fingers thinking, just blow the whistle. And when that 6-minute sound went up, everybody thought, where has that come from? It was that type of game. But your main point is right. Sanchez didn't play well at Crystal Palace. A lot of United players didn't play well. Pogba didn't play well at Crystal Palace. These are the biggest name players on the biggest wages. And I know that's not always a reflection of what they should and shouldn't do. But it was Marcus Rashford who was the standout. I think with Sanchez, he's not settled in yet. He's popular among the players. He's training well. And he has to find his role in the team. He's joined and it wasn't always obvious where he was going to play. And sometimes with a player like Sanchez, and I watched him very, very closely at Barcelona, he's versatile to a fault. So at Barca, his job was basically to get Lionel Messi the ball because he played a subservient role. At Old Trafford, he's the main man. His job is to create, to spark. He's versatile. He can play on the left, he can play on the right, he can play in the central role. And he hasn't really found where the best role is for him yet. His best game was his first game, that was against Yeovil. But he'll be judged against far better teams than struggling fourth division sides in the FA Cup. He'll be judged against teams like Sevilla. And it's up to people like Sanchez, who's got experience of playing against Spanish sides, to play a standout, to be absolutely brilliant, to win the tie. That's what he's been brought for.
Andy, maybe from a more neutral point of view, what did you make of Liverpool, having watched them at the weekend? Because I guess it's the second time United have played them this season. They've taken 3 points, or 4 points rather, from the 6 on offer. And there is an outside chance, if United get beyond Sevilla, that these two sides could meet in the quarterfinals, or maybe even further down the line in the Champions League. So it may not be the last they see of each other this season. And for once, Mo Salah was kept quiet.
Yeah, he's been brilliant, hasn't he, this season? He's maybe even going to be voted the Player of the Year for the Premier League. I looked at Liverpool as a confident team. I could see that in the fans. I could see that in the way that they were playing. They've gone 7 games unbeaten. I think this is a team which is their best side since 2014, when they had Luis Suarez, who was the best player in the league in that season, and they came close to winning the league. Or as Manchester United fans taunt them, you nearly won the league. But Klopp has got them playing. They don't seem to miss Philippe Coutinho, who's settled in well at Barcelona. I'm not watching Liverpool live every week, but I was at Anfield on Friday night. I did speak to a lot of people there around the Manchester United reserve game there against Liverpool, and I spoke to people who know what's going on there, and I was just trying to build up my level of information ahead of the game at Old Trafford on Saturday. And there's a buzz around Anfield. There seems to be stability off the pitch. I was really impressed by the new main stand. They seem to be more balanced than they were maybe under the previous owners. Jurgen Klopp is hugely popular. He's very charismatic, and he's got some very, very good players. I like Emre Can, Salah, Firmino. Those front three are very effective. Would I like to draw Liverpool in the Champions League? Well, you're going to be playing very, very good teams. I'm really split on it because I'm still scarred by memories of the Europa League games in 2016 when United were truly dreadful. So on one hand, I think United need to avenge that at some point in a cup competition. and Liverpool don't have Coutinho, who's the best player at Old Trafford in the second leg in that game. And on the other, Liverpool are not Barcelona, they're not Real Madrid. If Manchester United are to go through against Sevilla, then Liverpool would actually be one of the more favourable draws. Over the 2 league games this season, United have drawn away at Anfield and shown that they can do that. Done it twice now under José Mourinho, albeit frustratingly so, because those games were not a spectacle. But finally pulled out a performance at Old Trafford and beaten Liverpool and stopped their main threats playing. And they do have some very, very good threats. And if I was a Liverpool fan, I'd be feeling pretty good about Liverpool at the moment, because Liverpool do not have Manchester United's resources, nor Barcelona's, nor Real Madrid, and yet they're pushing. They would have gone above Manchester United had they won on Saturday, and I think they've got some very good players, and that's the last compliment you're going to hear from me about Liverpool from a Manchester United fan.
Finally, Andy, you've already mentioned, and we said that things are looking pretty secure from a United point of view in the Premier League now that all 4 teams will be going straight into the Champions League group stages. There are 9 clear of Chelsea, 9 games remaining, so the week that's in it they can focus solely on the cup competitions, try and win another trophy or 2 under José Mourinho. They're bright in the quarterfinals of the cup this weekend. Tomorrow night, so are you expecting an entirely different approach to the game against Sevilla in comparison to what we saw in the first leg? Or will it be just another case of José Mourinho doing just about enough to get the job done and not really caring about how it looks or the manner in which it's achieved?
I think his priority will be the win, but he has to do something differently to the first leg, because I've never seen a game where Manchester United had so few chances in comparison with the opposition. I watched the scoreboard in Sevilla in the first leg, and it was just ticking up through the second half. Manchester United shots on target 3, Sevilla 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. It's not what you expect with Manchester United. I think it will be different. Mourinho knows what Old Trafford is like for a big European game. He described the atmosphere as hell when I asked him about it, when he used to come, when he came with FC Porto. If you're Manchester United at home to Sevilla, given the form of the team, given the players it's got, given the lack of injuries, you've got to go for Sevilla. This is a Sevilla team which has conceded 4 goals on 4 or 5 occasions so far this season. They have improved under their new manager in 2018, but United have got to go for Sevilla just as they went for Liverpool on Saturday, and I fully expect them to do so. It has the potential to be a great European night, and United should be careful, because the last time Sevilla came to Old Trafford, it was for Rio Ferdinand's testimonial, and they raced into a 2-0 lead. Now, the last team to score 2 at Old Trafford in the first half, until Burnley did it recently. But Mourinho, he knows that Sevilla have got good players. He commented before the first leg about the little changes that Montella has made, the distance between the fullbacks and the central defenders. He's paid them an incredible amount of detail, because it's a hugely important game. And I don't expect Manchester United to win the European Cup this year, but I do expect them to get past Sevilla. And a lot of the people I spoke to in Sevilla, they have a similar opinion. But Sevilla have got some very, very good players, and they've had some exceptional results this season, and some horrific ones as well. I think United are more dependable and more predictable to get the results, and Mourinho's all about results.
Okay, on a slightly different tangent and aside, you wrote about a young Brazilian named Grêmio, or Arthur, who was signed by Barcelona from Grêmio at the weekend. Just 21 years old, 30 million they've paid for him, and there could be another 9 million in add-ons. And when you were speaking to the former United midfielder Anderson, you told us that he had been raving about the type of player that this guy was, that he was the best player in Brazil. Tell us a little bit about him and why Barca have gone after him.
Well, I know about him because Grêmio are from Porto Alegre, and my wife's from Porto Alegre, so I tend to go there every year or two. And onto that, I travel around and I interview lots of different people, because that's my job. So Anderson was one of the people that I interviewed this year. And when I was there in December, I arrived in the city just as they won the Copa Libertadores, which is the South American equivalent of the European Cup. And they were planning to play Real Madrid. And all the fans and the people at the club were bemoaning the fact that Arthur was not going to be able to play. And I met Rodrigo Possebon, who played 8 games for Manchester United, and he was just saying, this team, they're going to win the South American, they're the best team in South America in terms of the competition they've won. But actually, they've only got 1 or 2 players who would be good enough to go to a top European team. And he said one of them stands out, and that's Arthur, or Arthur, as you call him, if you're from Manchester. And then they met Anderson a few days later, and he said the same thing as Rodrigo Possebon, that this guy's got the potential to be like the next Andres Iniesta, that he would fit in well with the style that Barcelona play. And he seems to be a bargain to me. I know there are no guarantees, and I would have given a similarly glowing report of Andreas from Valencia before he signed for Barcelona, because he was doing really, really well, Portuguese, and he struggled. He cost £50 million, and he struggled at Barcelona. So there's not always a given that a player will do well at Barcelona, because Andre Gomez, he struggled, and they're probably going to let him go. And Arthur is the main man, but €30 million plus variables, I think he could be an absolute bargain if he's as good as people who know a lot about football think he is and think he can be, and playing with better players. Because that Gremio team's a good cup side, but he's gone from the equivalent of leaving, Everton and joining Barcelona. And I think he, from what I'm told, because I've only seen him play live twice, that he can be a very, very good player for them. And I think moving to Spain is much easier than moving to England when you're a Brazilian and you're making your first step out of South America, because cultural links are much stronger, and the linguistics, it's much easier to learn Spanish when you're Brazilian than it is to learn English.
Okay, Andy, brilliant stuff as always. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Andy Mitten there telling us his thoughts on United's win over Liverpool 2-1 in the Premier League at the weekend. It's such a massive sporting week on the back of what was one of the biggest sporting weekends of the year so far. It is Cheltenham week, and of course we're going to be all over Cheltenham across the Off the Ball social media mediums, and on FM and on OTB AM as well over the course of the week. We'll have an AM racing special every lunchtime ahead of the start of the first race each day. It's going to start tomorrow at 12:30. Here's a clip of AP McCoy. He was chatting on the all-new Keith Andrews show live. It's every Thursday lunchtime across Off the Ball. It was last week's episode that AP joined Keith in studio. He was speaking about his 19th season as champion jockey. AP figured that he'd finally cracked this racing malarkey.
I had this goal, this was my target. I didn't want to be a sports person that someone said he's not as good as he once was. And I was that kind of person that I never cared when he was. I was actually making sure that I wasn't saying to myself, you're not as good as you once were. I didn't want that to happen. I used the excuse that I didn't want people to think he's not as good as he was, but I didn't want myself to ever think that I wasn't as good. I didn't want to get to a point halfway through the season and think, you're gone. You haven't got it anymore.
So it was important for you to go out on a high.
So it was important to go out. So I told him, and he said, look, you've got to think about these things. And I at the beginning of that year, I rode my fastest 50th winner ever in a season. I rode my fastest 100th winner in a season. I came home that night, and I said to my wife, and she heard it in the Guy Sports newsroom that I'd ridden my 100 winner, fastest 100 winner. And she goes, oh, it's amazing. I said, you know what, Siobhan? I said, I actually think I'm getting better.
Did you say that to her?
Yeah. I said, I think this is the first time in my life that I actually think I know I actually think I've got it. I know what I'm doing. And she looked at me and think, you psycho. and she actually genuinely looked at me thinking, you're a psycho. But I genuinely, because statistically I felt like I had. Yeah. I'd spent 20 years.
But you thought after 19 years of being champion jockey, now I've got it right.
Yeah, now I've got it right. And
yeah, it's not fascinating at all, is it, listening to AP McCoy? You need to go back and either watch or listen to that entire chat between Keith and AP. It was last Thursday afternoon, particularly for the week that's in it, because he is just so interesting to listen to. A man who didn't feel he was good enough after winning 18 consecutive champion jockey titles. Okay, before we go any further, I should warn you that our next piece of content does contain some details of a graphic nature, details maybe that are sexual at times as well, because we're going to focus on the latest in the Paddy Jackson and Stuart Oling rape trial. It's due to enter its 7th and possibly final week before a judge and jury at Belfast Crown Court later today. The Ireland and Ulster rugby players are accused of raping the same woman at a party at Jackson's home in Belfast in June 2016. Their friend Blaine McElroy facing 1 count of exposure, and another friend called Rory Harrison is accused of trying to cover up what happened. The trial heard from those two last week, and our courts correspondent Frank Greaney joined us from Belfast to discuss what they had to say. Frank, the last time we spoke, it was the back end of last week on OTBAM. You filled us in on what Jackson and Olding had said to the jury when they took their stand in defence of the allegations made against them. Can you tell us what their co-accused Blaine McElroy had to say when he did the same on Friday?
Sure, yeah. Well, Blaine McElroy, like you mentioned, is facing 1 count of exposure. And the specific allegation that was made against him by the complainant when she gave her evidence was that he walked into the room after she had been allegedly raped by Paddy Jackson and Stuart Olding, and that he was completely naked. And it was at this point that she found her fighting instinct and that she left the room, and that he asked her something along the lines of, "You've had sex with these 2 guys, why not me as well?" And that she had shouted back as she was leaving the house, "How many times does it take for a girl to say no before the penny drops?" Something along those lines. Now, he did take the stand again last Friday, like his fellow accused have done. And he was asked about his recollection of what happened, and he described the lads calling over to his family home for drinks that day. He said they went to another pub to watch England playing in the Euros. He said they then went on to Ollie's, where they had a few more drinks. And outside Ollie's, he said he invited 3 girls back to an afters party at Paddy Jackson's house. He said the complainant also came back at some point. He said he didn't know any of the women. He described music being played. He said at one point the complainant actually tried to kiss him, but that he wasn't interested. He said that he had spent most of the night talking to a girl called Dara Florence. This is a witness who gave evidence at an earlier stage in the trial, who said that she walked in at one point and she saw a threesome going on in the room. She didn't think the woman was distressed. She didn't think she just witnessed a rape. Blaine McElroy was disappointed that it wasn't Dara Florence that was trying to kiss him. And he made another attempt, we heard, when Dara Florence was preparing to leave. He said something along the lines of, "Let's have sex, it'll be the best night of your life." But that her and her friend did decide to leave. And then at that point we heard that Blaine McElroy immediately texted Paddy Jackson to ask about the possibility of a threesome. He assumed at this point that Paddy Jackson was upstairs with the other girl, the complainant. And he was asked about that text and whether or not he got a reply. And he said that he didn't. But that he went upstairs to go to bed, and he said that when he stays at Paddy Jackson, and it's not unusual for him to do so, he said that he would stay in Paddy's bed because, in his words, it's a massive bed. He said the door was closed when he went up the stairs. He said he was fully dressed. He said he opened the door, he walked in, and he saw Paddy Jackson and the complainant naked on the bed. He said Paddy Jackson invited him in. Paddy Jackson now denies that. His defence barrister put it to him when he questioned him. Blaine McElroy, after he gave that evidence, he said that his client does not accept that he invited him in. Blaine McElroy said he did, and that when he did, he went over and began kissing the woman. He said it was consensual. He said that she put her hand inside his boxer shorts, and he said that she then willingly and with no reluctance performed oral sex on him. He denied using any force, and he said that if she hadn't consented, or if he had any indication that she wasn't consenting to what was going on, he said that he would have stopped.
So what was the general thrust of the cross-examination that he then faced? Is it the prosecution's case that he's actually lying about what happened?
Precisely, yes. Toby Hedworth spent most of Friday afternoon cross-examining him, and that was, I suppose, the exact point that he was trying to make, or claim that he was trying to make, is that this is a pack of lies, complete fantasy island, were his exact words. He claimed that none of this happened, that the prosecution's claim throughout has been that the 4 men, we know that they went for lunch later that day, and some of them claimed that they discussed what happened that night, or the night before. Some of them, like for example, Paddy Jackson, said they didn't, apart from himself and Stuart Olding, in exchange about what they claim happened in the room that night. He said there was no further discussion. The prosecution claims that they cooked up a story, that they hatched a story to protect themselves and their reputations. And that was something that we heard the complainant was worried about when she initially showed some reluctance to go to the police. She feared that they would come up with a story and that she wouldn't be believed, and that the Ulster rugby establishment would row in and she'd just be portrayed as some silly little girl, a slut who was up for it, that was lying. So he was asked about that, and Blaine McElroy said, no, that's not what happened. We didn't concoct a story. Now, Toby Hedworth went further, and he put it to Blaine McElroy that the version of events that he has actually given to the jury was actually Stuart Olding's version of events. He said that he accused Blaine McElroy of effectively messing up his lines and delivering Stuart Olding's. Now, Stuart Olding, when he took the stand earlier in the week, he said that he went upstairs again to go to bed. He said that he was going to share the bed with Paddy Jackson, and that when he walked in, again fully dressed, he said that Paddy Jackson and the woman were on the bed. He said they were also wearing their clothes. He said they were, or the woman beckoned him in, and that she kissed him and consensually performed oral sex on him. Blaine McElroy denied that's what happened, and he said that when he went to the police 2 days after this alleged incident, he said he simply told them the truth.
So what can we expect this week, Frank? We are due a Friday finish to the entire proceedings before the jury begin their deliberations. Do you reckon that is likely now at this stage?
Yeah, the finish line does look in sight. I mean, we have run a week over schedule now at this point. It was initially set down for 5 weeks. The court sat on Saturday to try and make up for some lost time, and we heard the evidence of Rory Harrison, the fourth defendant who's accused of perverting the course of justice and withholding information from the police. Now, his cross-examination was due to begin on Saturday afternoon, but a legal issue arose, and that will have to be resolved this morning when the court reconvenes before his cross-examination can continue. The judge told the jury that she expects the trial to wrap up before the end of this week. There is a juror that is in difficulty after March 23rd. So if it doesn't end by the end of this week, certainly by the early stages of next week, the trial will have to be wrapped up.
OK, Pat Greaney, our courts correspondent, thanks very much joining us live from Belfast this morning in what could be the final week, what we expect to be the final week of the Paddy Jackson and Stuart Olding rape trial. That's pretty much our lot for this morning. Thanks a million for taking the time to make us part of your Monday morning after what was an incredibly interesting weekend of sport. I think we'll have an equally interesting week ahead. That's only part of what we have on offering on Off the Ball today. Keep across all of our mediums. We'll be on our YouTube channel, our Facebook and Twitter as well. There'll be an awful lot going on during the day. And of course, tonight, Joe's back tonight from 7 o'clock. We'll have Pat Nevin and Kevin Kilban on the weekend's football, and we'll also have Monday Night Rugby as we look back on Scotland and maybe a little look ahead to what could be a Grand Slam winning week for the Irish rugby team. Thanks a million for watching. We'll speak to you again tomorrow and later tonight.
I had this goal, this was my target. I didn't want to be a sports person that someone said he's not as good as he once was, and I was that kind of person that I never cared about anyone. I was actually making sure that I wasn't saying to myself, you're not as good as you once were.
OTB AM. In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.